Hey everyone, I'm John Bozick with Electric Bike Report, and in this review we'll be talking about this wicked looking moped-style e-bike, the new Ride1UP Revv 1. We've started seeing a ton of e-bikes in this style following the rise in popularity of brands like Super 73, but we haven't seen many affordable options from well-established brands until now. Ride1UP is known for offering quality machines at a shockingly low price, and they haven't changed their tune at all with the Revv 1. This bike is available with two trim options at two different price points, but we'll be talking mostly about the higher end full suspension model that you see here. Right now, this version of the Revv retails for around $2,500, which is significantly less than similarly spec'd but more expensive models from the brand that first defined the moped style. Our biggest question when approaching the Revv 1 was this: is this the affordable but capable moped-style e-bike that we think many riders are looking for? Let's take a look at the Revv 1 specs and check out its performance to find out. Before we get started, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. This helps support the channel and also makes it easier for you to see more of our content. We're always talking about awesome e-bikes, and we'd love to help you find one that's just right for you. We've been huge fans of Ride1UP for quite some time because their bikes typically feel and function like more expensive machines. For this reason, their models are favorites on many of the best lists on our website, which we'll leave a link to in the video description. We were pretty surprised by the Revv 1's pricing, and our first goal when reviewing the bike was to see if it lived up to the standard set by the company's previous models. The Revv 1 is available in a hardtail or full suspension package like the one we have here. There are a few differences between the components included on each trim level that we'll go over shortly, but in this review we'll primarily be talking about the full suspension version of the bike. Both models use a Bafeng 52-volt 750-watt rear hub motor. There are a few key elements of this that we'll cover later in the spec section, but for now, just know that this makes the bike crazy fast. Regardless of model, the Revv 1 ships as a Class 2 e-bike, meaning that its motor will help you up to 20 miles per hour when pedaling or using the throttle, but this limitation is adjustable. We advocate strongly for safety and responsibility, so be sure to check your local laws. But the Revv 1 can be switched to Class 3 mode to access pedal-assisted speeds of up to 28 miles per hour, and also fully unlocked to off-road mode for unrestricted throttle and pedal-assisted speeds. You'll have to contact Ride1UP to gain access to these other modes, but let me tell you, they are something special. The Revv 1 uses a pretty sensitive cadence sensor that only requires you to keep the pedals moving to sustain its motor, and of course you can also just choose to rely only on the bike's throttle. It also has just a single-speed drivetrain, so we think most riders are likely to go with the second option most of the time. But either way, you end up with a nice, relaxed ride experience that doesn't require much effort from you. I think that covers the basics pretty well, so let's take a closer look at the Revv 1's full list of components and then see how the bike performed in our testing. Let's start out by talking a bit more about the Revv 1's two trim packages. As I said earlier, the bike comes in both a premium full suspension model and also a hardtail option that's even more affordable. Aside from the obvious suspension differences, the major variation between these two models are in their batteries, controllers, forks, and tires. There's a price difference of just a few $100s between the two, and we'll leave a link in the description so you can check current pricing. The hardtail model uses a 15 amp hour or 780 watt hour battery, a 25 amp controller, a standard style suspension fork with 100 millimeters of travel, and 20-inch by 4-inch Kenda Crusade knobby tires. The full suspension model that we tested has some upgrades with a 20 amp hour or 1040 watt hour battery that is going to give a better range. It uses a 28 amp controller that's gonna run a little hotter, but also deliver more power from the battery to the motor. This model has a double crown suspension fork that just looks better, but also has 20 millimeters of additional travel, so 120 total, and then also uses CST Scout E moped tires that are a bit more street specific with their tread pattern. As I mentioned earlier, both models use the same Bafeng 52 volt 750 watt rear hub motor, and there are a couple of important details here. First, in legality. Some of the fastest and most powerful e-bikes on the market use 1000 watt or higher motors, which in most places means that they're only going to be legal in off-road environments or on private property. The fact that the Revv 1's motor is limited to a nominal 750 watts means that it is much more likely to be legal where you want to ride it, as long as it's in Class 2 or Class 3 mode. Again, we recommend checking your local laws and regulations. But second, where many e-bikes use 48 volt motors and batteries, the 52 volt system on the Revv 1 has some key advantages. It delivers power more efficiently than a lower voltage system, which makes the bike faster and more capable on hills, as you'll see in our hill test section shortly. I also mentioned the bike's single speed drivetrain earlier, which again kind of encourages throttle use instead of pedal motion, but is an essential feature here because it defines the Revv 1 as an e-bike instead of an electric moped. Above the bottom bracket, you can see a box that might look like a battery from afar. This is actually just a housing or shroud cover for the bike's wiring and controller, which again is a bit of an important feature. First, in a way that we're not too thrilled about, we discovered that if you end up with a flat on the rear wheel, getting that taken care of will require you to remove this shroud and disconnect the motor from the controller before removing the rear wheel. Changing or patching a tube on the side of the road is already pretty difficult without these additional steps, so we'd love to see this process made a bit easier on the Revv in the future. It's also probably a good idea to invest in some extra flat protection before hitting the road. But there's a really great feature here too, or at least there will be soon. It's not currently available yet, but Ride1UP does have plans to offer a second battery that will mount to the top of the housing and greatly extend the bike's range. Moving on, the full suspension model uses a single rear shock to help soften any bumps on the road. This is a D&M AOY 38RC, which performed pretty well for us, but is also on the budget end of the spectrum, so you may want to consider upgrading it at some point. We noticed quite a bit of noise from the rear suspension that I believe was really just the hinge mechanisms. It wasn't a problem, but it is something to be aware of. The bike uses a 4-piston hydraulic brake system with 180 millimeter rotors on both wheels. Most brake systems we see are of the 2-piston variety, which usually work just fine, but we're happy to see a 4-piston setup on this bike due to the higher speeds it's capable of. As is the norm with moped-style e-bikes, the Revv features an extended but non-adjustable saddle. The padding here is extra thick, which is pretty comfortable, but personally I'd like it to have a bit more support and maybe a little less squish for those longer rides. I did appreciate the saddle length though. It's probably a bit too short to have an additional rider on the back, but it's long enough that taller riders like me can scoot back for better leg extension when pedaling. The bike has a super cool looking front headlight and a pretty nice tail light with both ends of the bike showing turn signals. This is a great feature for safety that we always love seeing, and it does a lot to give the Revv 1 full electric vehicle functionality on the road. Let's wrap things up with a cockpit though, starting out with the bike's display. This is a black and white LCD that is fairly basic, but I think it works pretty well, being large and easy to read. The left handlebar has a small button pad for the display and PAS system, which I liked in theory because of its size, but I also found that adjusting PAS levels with gloves on could be a bit tough because the buttons were so small. The bike's twist throttle is part of the right handlebar, along with a large control panel that governs the lights, turn signals, and horn. I really like the arrangement of all these controls, and it's nice not having to reach far to use them. With all of that out of the way, let's see how all of these parts came together actually in the Revv 1's performance. With the speeds at which e-bikes are capable of traveling, it is crucial that they have effective brakes. To evaluate brake systems, we pedal every e-bike we test up to 20 miles per hour and then hit the brakes to stop as quickly as we can while still maintaining control. We measure the distance it takes for the bike to stop, then repeat that process 2 more times, and this allows us to calculate an average stopping distance from those results. The 4-piston hydraulic disc brakes that we talked about earlier gave the Revv1 an average stopping distance of 19 feet 2 inches in our testing. This is pretty solid performance overall, especially when considering the weight of the bike. This thing weighs a whopping 93 pounds, which is very much on the high end of the spectrum. The result we ended up with puts the bike pretty much in the middle of our average or expected range, but there is one caveat here. As with a few other parts on the bike, like the fork and the chainring, the brakes do not display a brand. This likely contributes to the overall affordability of the Revv1, which is awesome, but it also means that we can't speak to their longevity or long-term reliability. That said, we were pretty amazed by how stable the bike was when braking. It's solid on the go too, but really didn't deviate much at all from its line of travel when we slammed on the brakes. This is, again, a really important feature on a bike that is capable of speeds at or above 28 miles per hour. For our circuit test, we pedal every e-bike that we test around a 1-mile loop made up of 4 right turns and a small 30-foot hill. We do this first with no assistance from the motor, and then again in each pedal assist setting. This gives us an idea of the bike's motor engagement, its handling, and its speeds at those different PAS settings. Now, we ended up doing a few things outside the norm for our circuit test on the Revv1. Many e-bikes with cadence sensors place caps on motor output at different PAS settings, which results in each setting having a different top speed. This wasn't as pronounced or obvious with the Revv1 in its standard Class 2 mode, so we gathered data in Class 3 mode as well. Also, since it's likely that many riders will just use the bike's throttle, we performed a lap to test its throttle speed as limited in Class 2 or Class 3 mode. Again, that's capped at 20 miles per hour in both settings. We did still pedal the bike around the first lap with no motor assistance, and let me tell you, it was not a lot of fun. This bike is heavy and it only has a single gear, so it is pretty tough to move. Additionally, with such a low saddle and an overall frame height, as well as the protective sidebars on the sides of the battery, pedaling can feel pretty awkward. Many of these characteristics are common among the moped-style e-bikes we've tested, so they're no surprise, and to be fair, the Revv1 was actually one of the better ones in the bunch. Regardless though, it's nice to be able to pedal the bike if the battery dies, but you might just end up walking it anyway. It's a good reminder to keep an eye on your charge level so you can be close to home when you're running low. In Class 2 mode, we noticed that the Revv1 was capable of hitting top speeds between 17 and 18 miles per hour in PAS1, which is definitely not something we commonly see. The motor assistance was relatively subtle and slow building. We felt pretty engaged with the drivetrain when pedaling in this setting, but that changed quickly as we increased the pedal assist level. The bike was able to hit its Class 2 speed limit of 20 miles per hour pretty easily in PAS2 and above. The only thing that really changed between those settings was how quickly we got up to speed. It took a while in PAS1, but PAS5 felt like a rocket, with the other settings falling somewhere in between. And in PAS2 through 5, we mostly found ourselves ghost pedaling just to keep the motor active. That's kind of the point here though. On some e-bikes I've tested, their cadence sensors require a fairly rapid pace of pedal rotation, but I was really happy to see that this was not the case with the Revv. The motor here stayed engaged with just a casual turning of the cranks. In Class 3 mode, we saw a lot less of a taper in our data at those higher PAS settings, which makes sense with the higher speed cap that gives the motor a bit more room to breathe. We also noticed a bit more differentiation between the speed limitations in each pedal assist setting, and the bike had absolutely no problem reaching and maintaining 28 miles per hour. Our data shows that there was still a drop-off in top speed in the higher end of the PAS settings, which really does indicate that the Revv was made to go fast. We tried the bike briefly in its unrestricted mode, and I don't think I've ever had so much fun on an e-bike. I hit about 32 miles per hour on the bike, and my fellow reviewer Forrest got it up to 35. Both of us had an absolute blast, and we agreed that the bike felt absolutely solid and stable even at those ridiculous speeds. Our range test is actually 2 separate trials where we pedal the bike until its battery runs out. The first test is done in the lowest pedal assist setting that provides constant input from the motor, and the second is done with maximum assistance. For each test, we measure the distance the bike was able to travel, and we compare that to the range advertised by the bike's manufacturer. For this test, we kept the Revv in Class 2 mode since it ships that way, so our results will likely differ from what the bike can do in Class 3 or off-road mode. Also, if you remember, the battery on the full suspension model here has a capacity of 1040 watt-hours, which is exactly 1/3 greater than the 780 watt-hour unit on the hardtail version. Because of that, we expect that there would be a pretty significant difference in performance there as well. As I said in the circuit test section, the Revv 1 is pretty capable in its lowest pedal assist setting. We performed our first range test in PAS1 and ended up traveling 52.2 miles before running out of juice. Our second test was done in PAS5 and we saw 36.4 miles in that setting. Our results are ultimately pretty close to Ride1UP's claims of 30 to 60 miles on a single charge, so we were pleased with the Revv 1's performance here, although again, there are a few caveats to our results. We were definitely pleasantly surprised to see this much range on a bike that very easily does all of the heavy lifting for you, but it's a little less shocking when considering the battery's gigantic capacity. For anyone looking to travel greater distances or go longer between charges, remember that Ride1UP will be offering the option for a second battery pretty soon. This seems to be a trend we're seeing with a lot of new e-bike models, and we think it's a really great fit with the Revv. To test every bike's hill climbing ability, we take them to a local hill called Hellhole, which is a steep but paved path that's 1/3 of a mile long with an average grade of 12%. This is a pretty serious challenge for most e-bikes, and some that we test don't make it all the way to the top. We do this test both in the max pedal assist setting and with just throttle to see if a bike has what it takes to make the climb. The Revv 1 completely knocked our socks off on this test. With just its throttle, the bike climbed up the path in 1 minute and 8 seconds with an average speed of 16 miles per hour. This is already pretty impressive, but we almost couldn't believe our results in PAS5. With maximum assistance, and again in its standard Class 2 setting, the Revv 1 shot up in 1 minute even with an average of 18.1 miles per hour. Now, we don't intend our hill test to be the end-all be-all of whether a bike is good or not, but it is a lot of fun to compare results. And we've seen some pretty impressive bikes recently. The Revv 1 is certainly one of them. The bike doesn't quite set any new records, but it does come pretty close as it's currently tied for our 3rd place result. That's important when you consider that the Revv 1's motor wattage and torque output is nothing too special. We see plenty of e-bikes with 750 watt rear hub motors, and torque ratings of 95 Newton meters is on the higher end, but is not unusual. What we don't often see are e-bikes with 52 volt electrical systems. As I mentioned earlier in the review, this setup gives the bike more power, which equals better acceleration and uphill capability, and this test clearly proves it. Toward the beginning of the review, I presented the question that we first had when approaching the Ride1UP Revv 1. It's the same question that we've had with most of the moped-style e-bikes that we've encountered. Can this bike live up to the expectations set by other heavyweights in this style? After testing the Revv 1, we might start asking if other affordable moped-style e-bikes can live up to this. We would like to see an easier solution to changing flats on the back wheel in the future, since so many disassembly steps are needed with the bike in its current form. And while we understand the trade-off with price and the quality of parts, it would be nice to see brakes with a reputable brand name as long as it wouldn't affect the Revv's price much. Again, we liked what we saw from their performance in our testing, but the peace of mind that comes with a name brand would give us even more confidence. I've tested quite a few e-bikes that have made a lasting impression on me, but the Revv 1 is the first that inspires me to say straight up, you should definitely buy this bike. It's awesome, it's affordable, and you really can't go wrong. For thrill seekers, this bike can get stupid fast, and it will definitely leave you with a smile. For commuters, it has all the basic safety features covered, as well as a practical level of range for daily use. It also has the option for an additional battery on the way. On top of that, it has a nice level of customization for your preferences and your budget with 2 trim models. It's comfortable, it looks great, and I'm gonna stop talking right now so I can go take a ride on this thing. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read more about our experiences on the bike, please check out the link to our written review in the video description. You'll also find a link to Ride1UP's website where you can check current pricing on the Revv 1 and pick one up for yourself. Before we go, If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help us to grow and share more content with the world. We'd love to hear from you in the comments section too, so let us know if you have any questions or if you think we left anything out. That's all for today. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Ride1UP Revv 1.